it's me, Michaela, and welcome back to my channel. It is time for my August reading wrap-up. These are all of the books that I read in August. Actually, it's not. I read another one digitally, so this is almost all of the books I read in August. I read a total of 8 books, and before I start talking about what books these are, as per usual, let's go through some of my reading stats for the month. So like I said, I read a total of 8 books this month. 7 of these books were owned, and all of those were physical reads, and I loaned 1 book digitally through Libby. I had 2 rereads this month and 6 books that were brand new to me. I had an average star rating of 4.3. It was a very good month, probably why I ended up reading so many books. I read a total of 3,350 pages for an average book length of 419, and I read about 108 pages a day, which is a very fantastic reading month. So I read a lot, partially because I was just reading a lot of good books, I was in a reading mood, but also because my job is doing communications, and a lot of the communications we do is international. So we do both like people in Europe, and also I'm communicating with people in North America. And for the majority of the month of August, a lot of Europe is closed. So I had some really slow days at work, so I was able to get a lot of reading done actually while I was at work in the month of August. I really don't see myself reading this many books in future months, but it was definitely nice to have the time to read in August. Let's just start talking about the books. The first book that I read was actually my first reread of the month, and it was A Curious Beginning by Deanna Raybourn. This is the first book in the Veronica Speedwell mystery series. I've given this 5 stars. I've given it 5 stars again. I love Veronica and Stoker in this mystery series. Deanna Raybourn's writing is so charming in this series, and it's just such a good historical cozy mystery with some really smart, strong main characters and a lot of fun banter. It's just a fantastic time. So this was a wonderful way to start the month. I've talked about this so many times, I feel like, on this channel. I don't want to just keep repeating myself, but it's really good. I recommend it. It's a great time. So secondly, I had another 5-star read, and that was The 7 Husbands of Evelyn, Hugo by Jenkins Reid. Now, if you've been around for a little while, you'll probably know that this book is on my 23 books in 2023 list, and it's also been on my radar for a book I wanted to read for years before now, and I had never read it, but I finally did, and I absolutely loved this book. I would call it a historical read, though there is a present day timeline. Basically, you're learning the life of the famous actress Evelyn Hugo as told through her interview with a journalist. It's separated into the 7 husbands that she's famously known for having. It's a fantastic read. I am definitely now a Jenkins Reid girly, and I'm gonna need to pick up some more Jenkins Reid books. I'm thinking probably Daisy Jones and the Six next, but I also am kind of maybe Malibu Rising. Thoughts and opinions on that, give them to me below. What one do you think I should read first after reading 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo? I'd love to know. I'm so happy I finally convinced myself to buy and read this book. I think I read it in 2 days. I absolutely was devouring this book. So good. And then I also am now forcing my best friend to read it because I loved it, and I was like, you need to read this book. So she's gonna read it, and then I can talk to her about it, and we can be like, oh my god, we both love this book, because she better love the book. If she doesn't love the book like I love the book, then we're gonna have a problem. So I started off the month with 2 5 stars, and what did I do? I read another 5-star. Okay, I read The Burning God by R F Kuang. This is the 3rd and the final book in the Poppy War trilogy by her, and I was just obsessed with this trilogy, okay? I gave this 5 stars. I feel like maybe on reflection, perhaps it was more of a 4.5, but you know what? In the moment I gave it 5 stars and we're sticking with it. I do feel like maybe the middle was actually a bit dragging, but I just loved reading this series so much that I kind of didn't care. And the ending, it was good. I love this series. I will be revisiting the whole trilogy, I think, at some point in the future, so I'm definitely glad I bought the series because I am a rereader. I'm not going to reread it like in the near future, but I think definitely, you know, like maybe a year or so down the road, I might want to pick up the whole series again because I loved all 3 books. I think the second book was probably my favorite, but all 3 were really amazing, solid reads for me. I don't know what else to say. This is an adult fantasy read. It's very dark, it's very heavy, it's very war focused, and there's a lot of talk of like war strategy, but there's also a lot of commentary in the book on war and the effects of war and repercussions of war. You follow Rin in this series, and in the beginning of the first book, she's 16, but there is a fair amount of time that passes throughout the whole trilogy. It's definitely an adult read. In the first book, she is in a very small, unprivileged place, and she studies for this really important exam in order to try and get into the most prestigious military school in the country, and she succeeds, and the story continues from there. Again, I absolutely loved it. I love this book. I love this series. I love R F Kuang. I can't wait to read Babel. So after reading The Burning God and feeling absolutely devastated, I was like, let me read A Perilous Undertaking, the second Veronica Speedwell book by Deanna Raybourn, because I need something to uplift my spirit. As much as I love The Burning God, it ruined me a little bit. Not a happy book. Great book, not a happy book. So I needed a fun read, and I read A Perilous Undertaking, and I gave this 4 stars. I still thought it was a very solid read. I still had a great time with it. I just didn't love it the same way I loved A Curious Beginning. You're still following Veronica and Stoker. There's a new mystery that they're solving, and they're going around with their usual banter and their antics, and it's a good time. I'm looking forward to reading the 3rd book, A Treacherous Curse, at some point in the fall. I mentioned that in my fall TBR video, and I'm just loving this series. Can't complain. Oh no, I gave a book a 4 star instead of a 5 star. Boo-hoo, my life is so tough, right? So the next 3 books I'm actually going to talk about together, and that is because I read all 3 of the Inheritance Games trilogy by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. I actually did a reading vlog for this. I will link it down below and in the cards. Here for you to check out if you're interested. I had read The Inheritance Game, the first book, before, so this was my second reread of the month, and then I read the Hawthorne Legacy and the Final Gambit to finish off the series. I really wanted to take another series off my currently reading series list, and this being a trilogy, and having finally bought the Final Gambit because it was available in paperback, so I had all 3 available to me. This seemed like a really great option to read books that I wanted to read and told myself I'd read. Funny how that works. I had a really great time with this series. It's a YA mystery series. There's a lot of like riddles and puzzles in it. It's described as being compared to Knives Out, especially the first book, The Inheritance Games, and I think that's pretty on par. There's a lot of lightheartedness to the mystery, despite sometimes things getting heavier for sure, but there's still kind of an overall feeling of just like a fun time. I think I read all 3 of these books in a week. I absolutely sped through them. They're extremely quick reads. The chapters in these books are like sometimes 3 pages, so you just like keep reading. I did like the first book the most. I gave The Inheritance Games itself 4.5 stars. I did consider giving this 5 stars, but I just didn't have the feeling for a 5 star, so I just gave it a 4.5, which seems funny because I gave The Burning God 5 stars and then thought I should give it a 4.5, but then kept it. Anyway, I gave it a 4.5 stars, and then I gave the Hawthorne... Oh, I dropped my book. Are you okay? I gave the Hawthorne Legacy and the Final Gambit both 4 stars. The whole series, I think it's very well written, I think it's well paced, and I think it presents to you exactly what you expect from it, and that's why it was such a good read for me. I don't think this is like the best series I ever read, but for what it says it's gonna give me, it gives me exactly that, and I loved it for it. So thank you, Jennifer Lynn Barnes. I do know that a lot of people seem to be reading her The Naturals series, I think it's a quartet. I think there's 4 books. I think she wrote The Naturals before the Inheritance Games and is kind of now getting some popularity in the book world. So I do have my eye on that series as well. For the next time, I'm kind of wanting something really quick, fast-paced mystery YA, because I think Jennifer Lynn Barnes does this very well. So the final and the 8th book that I read in August was The Mark of Athena by Riordan. This is the 3rd book in the Heroes of Olympus series, and I only gave this one a 3-star. I felt like it just wasn't as fun to read for me as the previous books in this series. I still liked it fine. I just felt like in the middle it was kind of dragging a little bit for me. I'm not sure if maybe it's because we were getting too many points of views. We did get Annabeth's point of view, I think, for the first time in this book, which was really exciting because obviously Annabeth is a character who has been around in the Riordan world at this point for a very long time, so it was really fun to be in her head. But I think because we're following in this series a larger group of demigods who are on, you know, the quest trying to save the world, I think it's just there's too many bouncing back point of views. I didn't like switching so much. In the previous 2 books, you had 3 characters' point of views that you switched through, and I think at this one, I think we might have had 5. We didn't have all 7, but we did have a fair number of point of views, and I just kind of felt it was too many. And I kind of felt like the quest we were on, I felt like the story was dragged out a little bit, and the kind of like side quests that you find yourself on in the middle of this book just weren't as exciting and fun for me as the like side quests that have happened in previous books. So I gave it a 3. I feel like in general Riordan is kind of like a solid like just 4-star author for me, so this is a little lower than I was expecting. I was hoping to really like this book because, you know, like The Mark of Athena, you kind of already expected to be like an Annabeth centered book, and I really like Annabeth, and I did really like the Annabeth part of this story. I just felt like overall the experience wasn't as great as my experience with other books have been. But I will be continuing on and finishing the series. I want to read everything in the Percy Jackson universe, so I'm making my way through that, and I'm sure the other books are going to be good, wonderful, fantastic, amazing. This one just didn't work for me quite as well. What can you do? You can't love every single book that you read. So that was all 8 books that I read in the month of August. It was a really good reading month. I read a lot of good books. I just read a lot of books in general. I read a lot of pages. The thing about reading all of the Riordan books digitally is that I don't realize how ginormous they are because it's just like my iPad, right? Like it doesn't mentally compute. So like whenever I read a digital book, I'm like, oh, I'm gonna read this so quick. That's not how that works. Like just because I'm reading it digitally doesn't mean it's shorter than the book. And we're not gonna talk about my logic because it doesn't make sense. But I read 8 books in August. I had a great time, and I'm continuing to have a great time with reading books. So there we go. August reading wrap up. Check. Complete. If you happen to like this video, make sure to give it a like. And if you happen to like me, consider subscribing. I'd be happy to have you. I'd love for you to comment down below your thoughts on any of these books that I read. And also let me know what your favorite read of the month was. I am always looking to see what other people have been liking so I can add more books to my TBR. I'm really trying to branch out and not read just fantasy because I feel like I was really fantasy focused for a little while, and as much as I love fantasy, if I only read fantasy, I burn out on fantasy. So I'm trying to read more like mysteries, and I want to start reading more romance books, so definitely give me some romance suggestions, and maybe I'll make another romance reading vlog, because I did make one romance reading vlog when I first started reading contemporary romance back in February. I'll link that somewhere too. I'll just stop blabbing on. I can talk for ages. So with that, I will leave you until the next one. I hope you're having a wonderful day today. Bye-bye.